There are many different kinds of gun owners, ranging from people who only own guns for defense or carry or those types of things to people who maybe live on a farm and they just need to bring a gun with them to protect their cattle or whatever. There are people who only have guns because they enjoy hunting. Milsurps is in a category kind of on its own because while these guns can be very practical for some of those purposes, there really is not much by any modern standard that these are best at in their price range. Most people want to own a Milsurp over something else because they want to take it to the range and they want to have fun shooting it. Maybe they want to do a little bit of LARPing and act like they're, in the Red Army, or just want to take a gun to the range and have fun with it, or maybe they like the historical and mechanical features of guns. That's more the category that I fall into, personally. And this video is kind of for people who maybe aren't like that, or they are, but they're just looking for their first. And that is, what is the best first military surplus rifle to own, or what is the best only military surplus rifle to own if you're not going to own anything else in that category? So I have some options right here, 3 and an honorable mention, and we'll just talk about them in the order that I have them. So this is in no particular order. Talk about the pros and cons of each. This is a Mosin Nagant. This one is an M44, but the most common available might be the Mosin Nagant 9130. You can really put either in this category, and both have the same advantages and disadvantages I'm about to talk about. This one is a carbine, and it has a side-folding bayonet. It was designed and produced during World War II because the Soviets were doing a lot more close-range fighting in cities and those types of things where you didn't necessarily need a full-length rifle. I really like this gun a lot. So the Mosin Nagant shoots 7.62x54R, and one of the advantages of this gun is because there are so many in the surplus market, it is very available. I don't know what the situation has been at Walmart recently because they've changed their policy on guns, and in the middle of COVID, it's hard to find this type of stuff. However, I used to be able to get ammo for this at Walmart for actually fairly inexpensive, a box of 20 rounds for $12. You can basically find this ammo at anywhere that sells ammo. Most places will have some sort of 7.62x54R because it is a pretty popular round because these rifles are in such wide circulation across the United States. So one of the biggest advantages of these is ease of ammo availability. There's modern production ammo, surplus ammo, and you can kind of choose which you want out of the many options. These are also really cool because a lot of them were refurbished after World War II, so they are in pretty good shape. Mine was produced in 1946, so you can tell, like, some of the wood has some dings and things, but it's really not that bad. This one's actually in really good condition, and it is all numbers matching except for the butt plate. Deals can still be had on these. Mine was $250 and came with about 100 rounds of ammo. So I would say one of the biggest cons of the Mosin Nagant is that the action is kind of finicky, and I'll have a video on that coming in a little bit. But basically, the action is just kind of strange and not what we're really used to in the US. Since it's a rimmed cartridge, it has some oddities. Another con of these rifles is that they were sighted in with the bayonet fixed, so your rifle might not shoot to point of aim if you buy one. However, the front sight is windage adjustable with a hammer. It's just in a dovetail, and then the rear sight is elevation adjustable. So it's possible that you can figure out like what range yours will shoot and adjust the front sight accordingly. You can also buy new front sights online and then maybe file one down and have your spare kept aside, or just file down yours. It's kind of up to you. You can figure those types of things out pretty easily. There are solutions, it's just a little bit extra work. So first option for first Milsurp for someone is a Mosin Nagant. Either a 9130 or an M44. M38s, those are the carbine before this one, and they're a little bit more rare, but they are cool. They just don't have the side-mounted bayonet. This is a really fun gun to take to the range and shoot, and you can find hunting loads for these. So if you do want to take this rifle hunting after you get the sights figured out, you can do that. Next up on my list, I have a Yugoslavian Mauser, but I am using this as a representation of all 8mm Mausers outside of Germany. So 8mm is the round that this fires, or 7.92x57mm. Mine is a Yugoslavian Mauser. It's a 2447. It was originally designed before World War II, and then they had bought parts, and these were built on spare parts left over after World War II, because Yugoslavia was one of the earlier countries that Germany invaded, or I guess Serbia at the time. The ammo for this isn't quite as available as on the Mosin. 8mm Mauser is kind of a little bit harder to get. You can still find it if you have like a Cabela's in your area. I actually, for the first time, found 8mm in my area, but it was around $2 a round, which was a lot more than this usually is. I think it was partially due to COVID and partially due to the particular store being very overpriced. But ammo for this is available. I've found it a lot online. In fact, I'm doing a review series on this type of ammo because there is so much of the ammo available is surplus and old and has not necessarily aged well. One of the pros of this action is that a lot of later bolt-action rifles were built on the Mauser 98 action because it is a very strong action. It's not only strong, but it also works very well. They mimicked it because it's a very good action, and so it's something that you'd be familiar with if you aren't into Milsurps yet, but you own some other guns. It's possible you've run across a Mauser action before. Another pro of this rifle is that it is very handy. It's accurate. 8mm is a really fun round to shoot. It does have some stout recoil. Now you can get these also in all sorts of variants. I'm trying to keep this list under around $500 because if you're just buying a Milsurp to have, you don't necessarily care about the history or the particulars of it. You don't want to spend much more than that. So this one, these can be had anywhere on the low end from around $250 to $400. But there are like Turkish Mausers that are in 8mm. Those are also really cool. The Serbian or Yugoslavian ones are really neat. They have a slightly different action, and they just hold an interesting place historically. But there are all sorts of 8mm Mausers from Mexico to China to Serbia. You can even get like Kar 98Ks if you're a really big World War II history fan, that are Russian capture or Yugoslavian capture. You can find those that are just like the German ones, although they have been captured and changed slightly. They have some different markings, and those can be had sometimes for around $500. So these are really cool rifles historically. They shoot a fun round. They can also be found in hunting loads, and they are just really, really cool. This is one of my favorite rifles. The action is smooth, and it's very, very different than the Mosin that I have. The final rifle I want to talk about is my Ishapur 2A1, and this is going to represent two different kinds of rifles. The first is, we're just going to say Enfields. The Enfield mainly comes in 303 British, however this one is in 7.62 NATO. And the second category is rifles chambered in 7.62 NATO, and we'll talk about that one second. We'll talk about the Enfields first. And I'm just going to talk about 303 first. We'll talk about 308 in that category. One of the things I really like about the Enfield is if you want something that's unique and different from other things you own, this is where you go. This is what we call cock on close, which I have a video on that I can link right now. But that means that the cocking piece stays back when you push the bolt forward, and it cocks as you close the action rather than opening it. It's very strange from what we know. Also, the locking lugs are in the rear rather than in the front. So if you're used to like modern hunting rifles, this is very different than that. It's just a really unique rifle in a lot of ways. One of the other things I really like about this is it takes two stripper clips instead of just one, so it's 1 and 2. I got into a World War I kick, and that's why I bought this rifle in particular, was because I just wanted something that was what I was seeing in the movies, and we'll talk about the 7.62 right now. So a lot of militaries, as the world was changing from the old world cartridges, 8mm and 303 and 30-06, to the modern cartridges of 7.62, well, I guess they still stuck with 7.62 by 54R, but as the world was modernizing after World War II, a lot of countries just took their existing rifles and rechambered them into 7.62 by 51 or 7.62 NATO, and that's what this rifle is. This is an Ishapur 2A1, and it was made in 1967, and basically that was after the world had adopted the NATO standard, but India still had the production lines up to make this, so they just continued making it in this new cartridge to use as training rifles and those types of things while they were adopting the FAL. These rifles are very cool. I actually really like this one. I really like 308 in this, has very little recoil, so if you're looking for a specific rifle, this is a very cool one. I highly recommend them. These can also be had for around the $400 price range. Lee Enfields are kind of like an upper end, like a lot of people really like Lee Enfields. They're kind of maybe like an upper end surplus gun. But you can still find Enfields, either the World War I variant, which we call the #1 Mark III, or the World War II variant, the number 4 Mark I, you can still find those between $400, $500, and maybe even on the lower end, depending on condition. The thing about 7.62 NATO chambered rifles is lots of people will tell you that you cannot fire .308 safely in a rifle chambered for 7.62 NATO. I've done limited testing with this rifle in that, and I haven't had any problems using like normal commercial loads that were full metal jacket and just like normal loads. I have not tried hunting loads in this rifle yet, and I'm a little bit nervous about that. However, if I had a Mauser action, because the Mauser actions are really tough, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. And there are lots of Mauser rifles that are in 7.62 by 51. The ones that come to mind instantly are the Spanish 1916 Mauser, the Spanish FR8, although those are a little pricier. They're really weird. They look like they have a gas tube on the bottom. Very strange. Lots of these rifles have been rechambered or were originally chambered in 7.62 by 51 while the country still had production lines going. That can be a really good category for you, especially if you're buying something Mauser-ish, because then you can fire basically all the .308 loads you want. You can fire those hunting loads that are very cool, and if you want to go take your rifle hunting. So that can be a good way to get to still shoot the rifle, and that's why I wanted this one. .303 is kind of hard to come by. It's hard to just go to the store and buy. Cabela's will have it, and some of those bigger sporting goods stores will have it. However, Walmart never will. Lots of local gun stores won't. Almost everywhere will have 7.62 or .308. So that is one advantage of this particular rifle over a .303 Enfield, and that's why I wanted this one mainly. I didn't want to have to deal with hunting down .303. Finally, for my honorable mention, as a representation of military surplus pistols, I have a Norinco 213 Tokarev. This particular pistol is chambered in 9mm instead of 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. It was a similar decision to that of the Enfield. So because it's chambered in 9mm, I can buy ammo anywhere. One thing to be cautious about is not all 9mm are the same. So lots of guns that might just say 9mm on them can be 9mm Largo, which is 9 by 21, 9mm Kurtz, which is what we call 380 ACP in America. So just because it says 9mm, you'll want to look it up and make sure it's the 9mm you think it is. It's pretty easy to find out. You can just do a quick Google search. Very few guns that I know of were made in both. Usually they were made in one or the other. Sorry, I'm pointing with this. I promise it is unloaded. Handguns can be fairly inexpensive. There are military surplus handguns in 32 or 9mm 7.62 Tokarev, ranging anywhere from like $200 to $400. And you could really have a lot of fun collecting military surplus handguns. They're inexpensive, they don't take up a whole lot of space, and a lot of them, whereas the rifles might be obsolete by modern standards, a lot of the pistols can still be pretty good pistols. Like this is 9mm, which is a modern round. Magazine holds 8 rounds, which is kind of low, but there are versions of this that hold 9, or I think one that holds 12. A lot of 32 ACP guns could be very good pocket carry guns. They have maybe 6 to 10 rounds of 32, which is very neat. So a lot of these can still be useful and effective handguns, and they're just cool. They're fun to shoot, and that's a main reason why a lot of people like military surplus. I personally like military surplus mostly because I like history and mechanics. The fact that they're guns makes it cool because I like guns, but the mechanics and the history behind it is really the coolest part of these guns in my mind. So that's why I like to own them. And owning something like this can be very cool. So handguns, rifles, that wraps up this video. I hope it was helpful to you, and if it was, feel free to leave a comment or a like, or just let me know what you thought, and I will see you guys next week. Goodbye.